Before I tell you Aoife's story, I want you to know why I wrote it. I've spent years reading letters from people who grew up being told they were too quiet, too sensitive, not enough. People whose silence was mistaken for emptiness. This story is for them. It's fiction, wolves, kings, fated bonds. But the wound at its center is real. If you've ever been the person standing in the back of the room, hoping not to be seen, this one is for you. Stay with me. I promise the girl on the marble floor does not stay there. The alpha struck her so hard her blood hit the marble before she did. You shame this pack. His voice cut through the choosing hole like a blade as the gathered wolves watched the silent girl collapse at his feet. 22 years old. No wolf, no voice, no name worth remembering. Wolfless filth has no place at a royal ceremony. She did not cry. She had forgotten how, years ago, blood gathered at the corner of her mouth, warm against the cold shine of the floor. No one moved to help her. No one dared. Then a window shattered high in the rafters, sharp, sudden, violent, and no one had touched it. Across the hall, the Lycan king lifted his golden eyes. The air changed, the wolves stopped breathing, and for the first time that night, the room understood that the broken, voiceless girl on the marble floor might not be the weakest thing in it. The morning of the Northern Pack's royal ceremony arrived, with frost on the windows and the iron-sharp scent of snow blowing down from the mountains. Inside the servants' wing of Blackthorn Manor, a young woman knelt beside a wooden chest, folding linen she would never wear. Her name was Aoife Marrowen, and the pack had not called her by it in 7 years. They called her the Silent One, the cursed thing, the shame. Sometimes, when Alpha Renwood Blackthorn was drunk and wanted sport, he called her Little Ghost because she moved without sound, ate without sound, bled without sound. The night her wolf had failed to come at 16, something inside her chest had latched shut, and her voice had gone with it. Aoife pressed her palm flat against the lid of the chest. Inside, wrapped in faded blue silk, was the only thing she owned that belonged to her. A small silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon, set with a single chip of moonstone. Her mother's, the last gift before fever took the former Luna of Blackthorn. 6 winters passed. The chain was tarnished. The clasp was broken. Aoife wore it anyway, hidden beneath her collar, where the rough cotton chafed her throat. She lifted the pendant now and pressed it to her lips. The metal was warm from her skin. Please, she thought, though she did not know to whom she prayed. Please let me be invisible today. The royal ceremony came once every 5 years, when the Lycan king himself rode the breadth of his territories to renew oaths with each subordinate pack. Every wolf above the age of 15 was required to stand in the choosing hall, kneel and offer a vow. It was the highest honor a pack could host. It was, for Aoife, a sentence. Because she had no wolf, she had no place. Because she had no voice, she could not vow. Her stepmother, the new Luna Pelagia, had made it brutally clear over breakfast. She would attend, she would stand at the back, she would not be seen, she would not be heard, and if she so much as drew the king's eye, Renwood would make her regret being born twice over. A bell rang in the courtyard. 3 tones, the pack was assembling. Aoife dressed in the pale grey shift Pelagia had sent up, a garment cut deliberately plain to mark her station. She had no shoes that matched. She braided her dark hair tight against her skull so it would not catch the eye. In the cracked mirror above the basin, her own face looked back at her, too thin, too quiet, eyes the colour of river stones, a fading bruise along her jaw from a stumble 3 days ago. Stumble. That was the word Pelagia had used. Aoife knew the truth. Her stepbrother Corwin had pushed her down the stairs for laughing at something on the radio. She had not known she was laughing until he hit her. She had not laughed since. She tucked the moon pendant beneath her collar. She breathed in, she breathed out. In the great hall below, the pack was gathering. She could hear the murmur of voices through the floorboards, the heavy boots of warriors, the soft swish of silk gowns. She could smell, even from up here, the rich meat of the feast already laid out. Venison, boar, honey-glazed pheasant, and the sharp, mineral tang that meant alpha blood and command pheromones. Renwood was working the room. A scent she did not recognize cut through it all, distant but closing, cold, clean, like cedar after rain, like the air at high altitude where wolves remembered they were once gods. Aoife paused, one hand on the door. She had no wolf, she had no instincts she trusted, but something in her chest, something old and unnamed, had just gone quietly, terribly awake. She did not know it yet, but the Lycan king was 3 minutes from the gates. The choosing hall of Blackthorn Manor was a cavern of black marble and white stone, carved a century ago when wolves still ruled openly and humans whispered prayers at the forest's edge. 200 members of the northern pack lined its long walls, dressed in their finest furs and brocades, every face turned toward the dais where Alpha Renwood Blackthorn stood beside his Luna. Aoife stood where she had been told, at the rear, behind a column, in the deepest shadow. Her stepmother had positioned her there with a hand on her shoulder that left bruises she would discover later. "Stay!" Palladia had hissed into her ear, breath sharp with mint and contempt. "Stay and do not exist." So Aoife pressed her back against the cold marble column and tried not to exist. The hall doors opened. The first thing was the sound, a low harmonic note that was not music, but the resonance of bodies that had stopped breathing all at once. Then the smell, cedar, ozone, and something darker, something ancient, like the smell of a thunderstorm, building over a glacier. Aoife felt her knees lock. The fine hairs on her arms lifted. The Lycan king entered. She did not see his face at first. She saw only the press of his royal guard. 6 warriors in matte black livery, with the silver crescent of the throne stitched at their throats. They moved like one creature with 12 legs. Behind them walked a man tall enough that the doorway seemed to bow for him, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, with a bearing that made Renwood, who was a large alpha by any measure, suddenly look like a boy playing dress-up. The hall sank. 200 wolves dropped to one knee in a single rustle of cloth. Aoife knelt last and lowest, forehead nearly to the marble. "Rise," the king said. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It travelled through the bones of the building and through the bones of every wolf in it, and Aoife felt it lodge somewhere beneath her sternum, exactly where the moon pendant rested against her skin. She rose because everyone rose. She kept her eyes down. "Alpha Renwood Blackthorn," the king said, and now his voice carried a courtesy that did not warm it. "Your pack is gathered. Begin the vows." Aoife risked a single glance. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 30, perhaps a touch more, though Lycan royals age strangely. His hair was the deep black of a raven's wing. His eyes, when they caught the light from the high windows, were the colour of molten gold. There was a thin scar at the line of his jaw, pale against tanned skin. He wore no crown. He did not need one. His name was King Tovin Orlaith of the House of the Long Moon, last of the pure Lycan bloodline, and the rumours said he had killed his own uncle on the steps of the throne when he was 17 to claim it. The rumours also said he had not taken a mate in the 13 years since. Cursed, some whispered. Choosy, said others. Waiting, said the eldest crones with knowing eyes. Aoife dropped her gaze again. The vows began. One by one, wolves of the northern pack approached the dais, knelt, and offered the ritual words, "My breath to your breath, my blood to your throne, my wolf to your call." The king received each with a measured nod. Some he spoke a word to, most he did not. Aoife did not move. She would not be called. She had no wolf to vow. It was Pelagia who ruined it. Halfway through the ceremony, when the king's gaze swept the hall with a slow, assessing patience that made Aoife's skin prickle, Luna Pelagia rose from her place beside Renwood and, smiling, descended the dais. She walked with the sweet, gliding grace of a woman performing for an audience of one. "Your Majesty," she said, and her voice was honey over a knife. "Forgive the interruption. Tradition holds that every wolf above 15 must offer the vow." She turned and her smile widened, and her eyes found Aoife in the shadow of the column. "We have one yet who has not." The hall went still. "Aoife," Pelagia said, soft as a curse, "come forward." Aoife's hands had gone numb. This had not been the plan. Pelagia had told her to stay hidden. Stay and do not exist. But Pelagia, Aoife understood now, too late, always too late, had wanted her seen. Wanted her, shamed in front of the king himself, to remind Renwood what a generous man he was for keeping the wolfless thing alive at all. Aoife stepped forward. The walk to the dais was the longest walk of her life. 200 faces turned to watch. She heard the hiss of indrawn breaths, the small ugly laughs of people who had hated her for years and now had permission to hate her aloud. She kept her chin level. She kept her hands folded at her waist, where they could not be seen to shake. She reached the foot of the dais. She knelt. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. A silence opened up in the hall like a wound. Aoife knelt with her head bowed and her lips parted, and the vow she could not speak hung in the air between her and the Lycan king like a thing she was failing to catch. "My breath to your breath." She knew the words. She had memorized them as a child, when she still believed she would one day stand and say them. "My blood to your throne, my wolf to your call." But she had no wolf to give, and her voice had been gone for 7 years, and her tongue lay in her mouth like a stone. A laugh broke the silence. Corwin, her stepbrother, from somewhere near the front. The sound was sharp, theatrical, cruel. The Lycan king's golden eyes had not left Aoife's bowed head. "Speak the vow," Alpha Renwood said, and there was already a warning in his voice. He had stepped forward off the dais, his bulk casting a shadow across her. The pack alpha aura rolled off him in waves, the kind of pressure that made lesser wolves flinch and submit. Aoife felt it press down on her shoulders, on the back of her neck, trying to force her smaller, lower, gone. She tried so hard that her throat burned with the effort, that her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Her lips moved, no sound emerged, not a whisper, not a breath shaped to a word. 7 years of silence held her like a fist around her throat. "Speak." Musin, she could not. The king's gaze flicked finally away from her toward Renwood. That was when the alpha struck. It happened so fast that even the warriors in the hall did not have time to look away politely. Renwood's hand came down across Aoife's face in a backhanded blow, and the force of it lifted her off her knees and sent her sprawling sideways onto the marble. Her cheek hit the stone first, then her shoulder. The taste of copper bloomed across her tongue. Her ear rang with a high, distant whine. "You shame this pack," Renwood said, breathing hard, the flush of his own fury crawling up his neck. "Wolfless filth has no place at a royal ceremony." Aoife lay where she had fallen. She did not move. She had learned long ago that movement was a provocation. Her cheek throbbed. Blood pooled at the corner of her mouth and dripped onto the white marble in a slow, deliberate bead. Somewhere above her, very high up in the rafters, a stained glass window shattered. It was not loud. It was a small, crystalline sound, like a wine glass falling in another room. A few shards of coloured glass tinkled down onto the floor 20 feet from the dais. No one had touched the window. There was no wind. Everyone heard it, and no one understood. And the moment passed because what came next was larger. The Lycan king had risen from his seat. He did not speak yet. He did not need to. The temperature in the hall dropped by what felt like 10 degrees in a single breath. Aoife, dazed on the marble, watched a frost pattern bloom across the polished stone 6 inches from her face, and she understood with the part of her mind that was still working that the king's wolf was very close to the surface. His aura unfolded. If Renwood's alpha pressure had been a hand pressing down, the king's was a tide. It swept through the hall, and every wolf in it, every wolf, including Renwood, sank to their knees, not by choice, by biology, by the ancient law that said a Lycan royal stood above an alpha the way an alpha stood above an omega. Bones bent, necks bared. Aoife heard her stepmother make a small choked sound, and the satisfaction of it was so brief and so guilty she barely felt it before it was gone. Only Aoife remained where she was because she was already on the ground. The king stepped down off the dais. His boots made no sound on the marble. He walked past Renwood, who knelt rigid and trembling, eyes fixed on the floor, and he walked past the stunned circle of warriors, and he walked past Pelagia, whose honeyed smile had curdled into a rictus of terror. He walked to where Aoife lay. He knelt. In all the long history of the House of the Long Moon, no king had knelt to a subject in a subordinate pax hall. It was not done. It was not even contemplated. And yet here he was, this enormous dark-haired man, with eyes like sunset on a knife blade, lowering himself onto one knee beside a girl in a grey shift with blood on her mouth. He did not touch her at first. He inhaled. Aoife saw his nostrils flare, saw the pupils of those golden eyes blow wide and dark, saw something move behind his face that was not entirely human and not entirely wolf, but the older, stranger thing the Lycans were, the thing the rest of the shifter world had nearly forgotten. He reached out very slowly and brushed his thumb along her jaw just beneath the swelling. His thumb came away with a smear of her blood on it. He looked at it, then he looked at Renwood, and when he spoke, his voice was almost gentle, which was the most terrifying thing of all. "Whose blood?" the king said. "Do you imagine is on my hand?" I've thought a lot about why scenes like this one resonate so deeply, and I think it's because most of us have witnessed a version of it, not with wolves, not with kings, but in classrooms, in family dinners, in workplaces. The quiet person being humiliated by someone in power, while everyone else looks away. What makes this scene satisfying isn't the king's strength. It's the fact that someone finally looked. Sometimes the most radical act in a person's life is being seen by someone who refuses to look away. That's the lesson I want you to carry from this chapter. Now, back to the hall. No one in the choosing hall breathed. Renwood was still on his knees, head down, the cords of his neck standing out with the strain of resisting the king's aura and failing. Sweat had broken out at his temples. The proud alpha of the northern pack looked at that moment like a dog that had lunged at the wrong throat. Your Majesty," Renwood managed, voice thick. "She is wolfless. She is a stain on the bloodline. The discipline of my pack is—" "Whose blood," the king repeated very softly, "is on my hand?" The aura tightened. Aoife, lying on the marble with her cheek still pressed to the stone, watched her stepfather's hands begin to shake against the floor. She had never, in 22 years, seen Renwood Blackthorn shake. "Hers," Renwood whispered. "Aoife's. Aoife." The king turned the name over in his mouth as if testing the shape of it. His golden eyes returned to her. "Aoife." She did not know what to do. No one had said her name like that in 7 years, not as an insult, not as a sneer, not as a summons. He had said it the way one says a word that means something. Her chest hurt. The moon pendant beneath her collar felt suddenly hot, as if it had been left in the sun. The king leaned closer. He did not touch her again, not yet, but he brought his face near enough that she could smell him properly. Cedar, ozone, the high cold scent of mountain air, and underneath it something she had no name for, something that made the part of her chest that had latched shut 7 years ago tremble like a door on a loose hinge. "Little one," he said, quiet only for her. "Can you stand?" She did not know. She tried. Her arms shook. He saw, and before she could fail, he slid one arm beneath her shoulders and one beneath her knees, and he lifted her off the marble as if she weighed nothing. She was 22 years old, and she had not been carried since she was a child, and she had forgotten that being held could feel like anything other than restraint. He stood with her in his arms and turned to face the hall. "Hear me," King Tovin Aoife said. His voice was no louder than before. It did not need to be. Every wolf in the hall was bound to him by the oath they had just sworn, and his words slid through the binding like a blade through silk. "This girl," he said, "was mine." The hall made a sound, not a word, not a breath, a collective animal noise of shock, the small involuntary sound a pack makes when its understanding of the world has just been broken in half. "What?" Pelagia began, and the king's gaze flicked to her, and Pelagia made a strangled sound and dropped her face to the floor. "My mate," the king said, "my chosen, my queen." Aoife in his arms made a sound of her own, the smallest possible sound. A half-breath caught at the back of her throat, because the moon pendant at her collar had gone, in that instant, from warm to singing. She felt it through her sternum, as she felt it through her teeth. The shut door in her chest had not opened, but it had moved for the first time in 7 years, and the movement hurt. Mate. She knew the word. Every wolf child knew the word, the fated bond, the 1 in 1,000 miracle, the sole recognition that even kings did not get to refuse. She had heard the old women tell it by the kitchen fire when she was small. You will know your mate by scent, by the way your wolf rises to meet theirs, by the way your bones say yes before your mouth does. She had no wolf. Her bones had no language she trusted. And yet, she is wolfless, Renwood burst out. And there was real panic in him now, the kind of panic that breaks discipline. Your Majesty, she has no wolf. She is broken. She cannot be a queen. She cannot give you heirs. She cannot even speak. The king turned his head. He did not roar. He did not shift. He did not raise his voice at all. He simply looked at Renwood, and the air between them turned to glass. "You struck her," the king said. "In front of me." Renwood's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He had, perhaps for the first time in his life, run out of words. "You struck her," the king continued, "knowing what I am, knowing what she is to me, though you did not, and that is the only mercy I will offer you today. Listen carefully. Aoife Blackthorn. By royal right and the old law, I claim this woman. By royal right and the old law, I take her from your house. By royal right and the old law." His golden eyes burned. "You will not lay hand on her again, in this life or the next, and if I learn that any wolf in this pack has ever lifted a hand to her, That wolf will answer to me, personally." The aura cracked through the room like a whip. Several wolves whimpered aloud. "Do you understand me, Alpha?" "Yes," Renwood whispered. "Your Majesty, yes." The king looked down at Aoife in his arms. "We're leaving," he said softly. "Is there anything in this house that belongs to you?" Aoife thought of the little wooden chest, the blue silk. She thought of her mother's face the night she had pressed the moon pendant into her palm and said, "Whatever happens, you are not alone." She lifted her hand, shaking, slow, and touched the pendant at her throat. The king saw. He nodded once. "Then we have what we came for," he said, and he carried her out of Blackthorn Manor without looking back. The royal carriage was lined in dark velvet the colour of midnight forest, and it smelled of leather oil and the king's scent. And Aoife sat very still on the bench across from him, with her hands folded in her lap, and her mind somewhere 2 miles behind her, still on the marble floor. He had wrapped her in his own cloak. The fur collar brushed her chin. She was warmer than she had been in years. The carriage rolled out through the iron gates of Blackthorn lands as the early dark of winter began to settle, and the king watched her with his golden eyes, and he did not speak for a long time. When at last he did, his voice was lower than it had been in the hall, gentler, as if he had taken off some piece of armour he could only remove in private. "My name is Tovin," he said. "You do not have to call me Majesty. You do not have to call me anything at all." She watched him. Her hands tightened on the fur of the cloak. "I felt you the moment I crossed the threshold," he said. "Did you feel it?" She nodded. Once very small, the cedar and ozone scent, the way the moon pendant had warmed against her skin. She had not understood what it was, but she had felt it. "Good," he said. A silence. The carriage swayed. Outside, the dark forest of the north began to slide past the window. The trees crowded close to the road, branches netted with old snow. Aoife had never been beyond the Blackthorn lands in her life. She watched the unfamiliar shapes of trunks and shadows and felt her heart beating in a way she did not recognize. "I will not pretend I do not know what I just did," Tovin said. "I claimed you in front of 200 witnesses in a hall not my own. I gave you no choice. I am aware." He looked at his hands, where her blood had dried in the lines of his thumb. "If you do not want me, half, you have only to say so. The bond does not give me the right to take what you do not give. I will return you to anywhere you wish to go, anywhere but back to him. That I cannot allow." She looked at him. She could not say so. That was the problem. She could not say anything. He saw her face and seemed, for the first time, to understand the trap of his own offer. Something flickered across his features, frustration, but not at her, never at her, and then it smoothed out again into the patient stillness of a man who had just realized he would have to learn an entirely new language. "Then we will find another way," he said. He reached into the satchel beside him on the bench. He drew out a small leather notebook and a pencil, and he held them out to her across the space between them. "Will this serve?" he asked. Aoife stared at the notebook. It had a soft brown cover, the leather worn at the corners, the kind of notebook a man carried for his own private thoughts. She took it from him with hands that shook only a little. The pencil was warm from his pocket. She opened the notebook. The first dozen pages had his handwriting on them, dense and slanting and mostly in a script she did not recognize. He saw her hesitate. "Skip to the back," he said, and there was the smallest curve at one corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, a promise of one. She turned to a clean page. She wrote, very slowly, in handwriting that had grown stiff from disuse, "Thank you." He read it, he nodded. You are welcome, he said as she rode. Why me? He was quiet for a long moment. He looked out the window at the passing trees. Because the goddess does not explain herself, he said at last. Because 13 years ago I stood at my coronation and I knew, the way one knows the shape of one's own hand, that my mate had not yet been born, because I have waited. Because every winter since then, I have ridden the territories on the royal circuit. And every winter I have come home alone, and every winter the elders have asked me to choose a queen for political reasons. And every winter I have refused them, because something in me has insisted. He looked at her. I crossed the threshold of Blackthorn Manor today, and I knew, before I saw you, before I knew your name, I knew. She wrote, hands trembling, I have no wolf. He read it. His expression did not change. I do not care, he said. She blinked at him. She wrote, the words coming faster now. Harder, I cannot speak. I have not spoken in 7 years. I do not know if I ever will again. He read it. I do not care, he said again. Then more softly, I will not love you for the words you might one day give me. Aoife, I will love you for being the woman my soul recognized. The rest is yours to keep or to give as you choose, in your own time. She looked down at the notebook in her lap. A tear fell on the page and smudged the 7. She did not wipe it away. She had not cried in front of another living person since she was 15, and she did not know how to stop now that she had begun. The king did not move toward her. He did not try to comfort her. He simply sat across from her in the swaying carriage, golden eyes steady, and let her weep without performance and without shame. And somehow that was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in 7 years. When she had finished, he passed her a clean handkerchief. It smelled of cedar. She kept it. What Tovin is doing here has a real-world name. Therapists call it co-regulation. The act of staying calm and present beside someone whose nervous system has been broken by years of fear, so that their body can slowly learn safety again. Selective mutism, the condition Aoife is living with, is well documented in trauma survivors. It is not stubbornness, it is not weakness, it is the body's last line of defense when speaking has, for too long, meant being punished. The reason Tovin doesn't push her to speak is because he understands, instinctively, the way good people sometimes do, that healing cannot be commanded. It can only be invited. Remember that. The next time someone in your life goes quiet. The Lycan capital was called Hail Oren, the city of the long moon, and it rose out of the northern foothills, like a thing carved from the mountain itself, all pale stone and dark-tiled roofs and high windows that caught the winter sun. Aoife saw it for the first time at dawn on the 2nd day of travel, leaning forward in the carriage with her breath fogging the glass and her hand clenched around the moon pendant at her throat. The palace at the city's heart was called the Hold of the Long Moon, and it was older than any building Aoife had ever stood inside. The corridors were lit by suspended glass orbs that glowed with a soft, silvery witchlight. The floors were polished slate. The walls bore tapestries of wolves running under moons, of queens crowned in rowan and bone, of kings with golden eyes who looked enough like Tovin that Aoife understood, for the first time, that she had walked into a story. She was given rooms next to the king's. Not his, not yet. He had been very clear in the carriage about that. You will have your own door, he said, your own lock. You will have it for as long as you want it. The bond will pull at us both. I will not lie to you about that, but pulling is not taking. You set the pace. Always. The rooms were the largest she had ever been inside. There was a bed wide enough to sleep 4. There was a fireplace tall enough to stand in. There was a wardrobe of clothes already prepared. Someone had ridden ahead to send word. She realized the king had sent word before they had even left Blackthorn, and the clothes fit her, all of them, as if the seamstresses had her measure by intuition. She lived in those rooms for the first 3 weeks like an animal that had been moved from a small cage to a large one and did not yet trust that the door would stay open. She did not speak, she had not expected to, but she wrote. She wrote in the notebook he had given her, and at the end of each day she left it on the small table by the door, and in the morning it was always returned with his answers. In the slanting hand she now recognized as his. They had a conversation, page by page, that was unlike any conversation she had ever had in her life. She wrote things she had never told another soul. She wrote about her mother dying. She wrote about her wolf failing to come on her 16th birthday. She wrote about Wrenwood, and about Pelagia, and about Corwin, and about the 7 years between then and now in which she had learned to be a ghost. He wrote back. He did not flinch from any of it. He told her about his own boyhood, about a father who had died young, an uncle who had tried to take the throne by poison, a coronation at 17 with blood still drying on his hands. He told her he had not slept through a single night for the first 2 years of his reign. He told her, "I am also a person who has been broken and put back together. I know the shape of it." She wrote, "On the morning of the 22nd day, why does the pendant feel warm when you are near?" The next morning his answer was waiting, "Because it is moonstone, Lycan moonstone, the old kind, mined from the cliffs above Hale Oren 3 centuries ago. It is rare, and it does what your wolf would have done if she had come. It recognizes a true mate's scent and resonates. Your mother knew. Whoever gave it to her knew someone in your blood. Aoife was ours, long before either of us was born." She read that letter sitting on the wide window seat of her rooms, with the winter sun slanting in across her lap, and for the first time in her life she felt something she could only call belonging. That night, she opened the door between their rooms. She did not go through, she only opened it. In the morning, his door was open too. Neither of them said anything about it. Neither of them needed to. The first time she ate dinner with him in his private study, she sat across the small table from him and watched him cut his meat with the precise, economical motions of a man who had learned long ago that elegance was easier than effort. He looked up and caught her watching, and one corner of his mouth lifted. "You are staring, little one." She blushed. She had not blushed in 7 years. The sensation was so unfamiliar she nearly dropped her fork. She wrote on the napkin beside her plate, "I forgot what a person eating looked like." He laughed. It was the first time she had heard him laugh, and she discovered she liked the sound very much. Yay, low, rough, unforced. The kind of laugh a man only made when he had decided to trust the company. "I have forgotten many things too," he said. "We will remember together." She nodded. She wrote on the napkin, in handwriting that no longer shook, "Yes." Here's something I've learned writing these stories. The fantasy of being rescued is everywhere in romance. But what makes Tovin different, what I tried very hard to write, is that he doesn't rescue Aoife from herself. He gives her a door, a notebook, a lock she controls, and a pace she sets. That's not rescue, that's respect. And in the real world, that distinction matters more than any grand gesture. Anyone who truly loves you will hand you the pen. They will not write your story for you. 6 weeks into her life at the hold of the long moon, on a grey afternoon when the first true snow of midwinter was coming down in fat, slow flakes outside the windows, Aoife was reading in the East Library when one of the king's pages found her, breathless and white-faced, and said, "My lady, there is a man at the gate. He says he is your father. He has come to collect you." Aoife went cold. She set the book down. She rose, the page hovered, uncertain. She had never been called my lady by anyone before. And the boy's eyes flicked to her face, watching for instruction, as if she might know what to tell him to do. She did not know what to tell him. She moved through the corridors of the hold like a sleepwalker, and the page trotted to keep up, and somewhere ahead of her she heard Tovin's voice, low and even, already in conversation with someone whose voice she also knew, Renwood. She came out into the receiving hall, and there he was, Alpha Renwood Blackthorn, in his finest furs and his second-best smile, standing in the middle of the great pale stone room with two of his warriors at his back, and Pelagia at his side, and Corwin behind them both, and a thin, tight expression on Renwood's face that he was struggling to dress as humility. Tovin stood at the head of the hall in a coat of dark wool, hands clasped behind his back, golden eyes very still. "Your Majesty," Renwood was saying, "I beg only that you hear me. There has been a misunderstanding. My daughter is delicate. She is not well. The trauma of the ceremony, the shock of your generous attention, has clearly—" He saw Aoife in the doorway. His face did something complicated and brief. The corner of his mouth lifted in the old way, the way it always had before he hit her. "Aoife," he said, and his voice tried to find the old Alpha command underneath it. "Come here, child. We're going home." She did not move. Pelagia stepped forward, hands extended, eyes wet with practiced tears. "Sweet girl, oh, sweet girl, look at you. Have they been kind? You must come home. We have been sick with worry. A mistake was made, a terrible mistake. Your father and I have spoken of it every night. Come home. If you have ever escaped a household that hurt you, you already know this scene, the smile, the rewritten history, that we were just worried about you. Just the performance of love staged for an audience. People who hurt us rarely come back asking for forgiveness. They come back asking for access. And I wrote this scene the way I did because I wanted every survivor watching to hear, out loud, what Aoife hears in her bones. You do not owe them your return, not your presence, not your forgiveness, not even your explanation. Walking away is not cruelty. Sometimes it's the first kind thing you've ever done for yourself. The Alpha command brushed across Aoife's skin like an insect. She felt it try to find purchase. She felt it slide off. Because she had no wolf, she had no Alpha bond, and because she had no Alpha bond, Renwood Blackthorn, who had used his Alpha voice on her as a weapon for 7 years, had nothing in her to grip. He had never realized. The understanding broke over her like a wave. Tovin's voice, quiet at her ear, he had crossed the room without her noticing, said, "You do not have to speak. You do not have to write. You only have to tell me, with one nod, whether you wish me to send them away." She turned her head, she looked at him, she nodded. "Good." Tovin said. He stepped forward. "Alpha Blackthorn," he said, "you appear to be confused about the meaning of the word claimed. Allow me to clarify. Aoife is not your daughter. She has not been your daughter since the moment her mother died, and you decided to use her for sport. She is not yours to collect. She is not yours to take home. She is not yours, full stop." "Your Majesty," Renwood began, "I am not finished." The aura unfolded, not as it had in the choosing hall, not the killing weight of it, but a warning, a reminder, a small sample of the avalanche. Renwood's face went grey. "You came to my city," Tovin said, "and you walked through my gate, and you stood in my receiving hall, and you tried to use Alpha command on my mate. In my house, in front of me, His golden eyes burned. Do you know what the penalty is, Aoife Blackthorn, for using command on a royal consort? Renwood did not answer. Could not. It is execution, Tovin said, by the old law, without trial. Pelagia made a thin, keening sound. I will not invoke it. Tovin continued, and his voice was very calm. Because my mate is a person of greater mercy than I am, and I will not begin our life together by spilling her stepfather's blood on her behalf without her express consent. He looked at Aoife. Do I have your express consent, little one? She thought about it. She thought about the night Renwood had pushed her into the courtyard in winter and locked the door. She thought about the 7 years of being called Little Ghost. She thought about Pelagia's hand, hard at her shoulder, stay and do not exist. She thought about Corwin laughing at the stairs. She also thought about her mother, who had pressed the moon pendant into her hand and said, You are not alone. Her mother, she thought, would not want this man's death on her account. Her mother had been gentler than Aoife had ever managed to be. She shook her head once. Slow. Tovin nodded as if he had expected nothing else. You will leave my city before nightfall, he said to Renwood. You will surrender alpha rank of the Northern Pack to my regent within the month. You have proven yourself unfit. You will not contact this woman again. If you do, my mate's mercy expires. Are we clear? Yes, Renwood whispered. Out! They were escorted out by 4 of the royal guard, and Pelagia was weeping in earnest now, and Corwin had not said a word the entire time, which Aoife noticed and tucked away. The doors closed behind them. The receiving hall was very quiet. Aoife realized slowly that she was shaking. Tovin turned to her. He did not touch her until she lifted her hand to him. She did, and he took it, and he drew her into the circle of his arms, and she pressed her face against the wool of his coat and breathed in cedar and ozone and the cold, high mountain air. And the shut door in her chest, the one that had not opened in 7 years, creaked just a little. A small, dry, almost sound rose from her throat. Not a word, not yet, but the shape of one. Tovin's arms tightened around her very gently. I heard you, little one, he murmured into her hair. I heard. The first word came on a night in early spring, almost 4 months after the choosing hall. The snows had begun to retreat from the lower slopes of Hale Oren. The wide gardens of the Hold of the Long Moon, walled and private and tended for centuries by the same family of gardeners, were beginning to show their first green, snowdrops along the east wall, the smallest pale shoots of crocus pressing up through the dark earth. Aoife had taken to walking in the garden after supper. Sometimes Tovin walked with her, often she walked alone, because he had understood without needing to be told that her healing required hours that belonged only to her. That night the moon was full. She walked the gravel path in a wool coat too fine for her, with the moon pendant warm against her sternum, and she stopped at the small stone bench beneath the rowan tree at the garden's heart. The moonlight came down through the bare branches and laid silver patterns across her hands. Somewhere, a nightingale was practicing its first song of the year. She sat, she closed her eyes, she thought of nothing in particular, and of everything, of her mother's face in candlelight, the night she had pressed the pendant into her palm, of the marble of the choosing hall, cold against her cheek, of Tovin in the carriage, holding out a notebook with hands that did not shake, of the small, rough laugh he had made at dinner. The night she had written, I forgot what a person eating looked like, of the way he said her name, Aoife, like a word that meant something. She thought of all the years of silence, the latched door in her chest, the small frightened thing she had become to survive, And she thought, softly, certainly, I do not have to be that anymore. The latched door did not open all at once, but something in her chest lifted, the way a bird lifts off water, heavy at first, then light, then gone, and a sound came out of her, quiet and unsteady. That was not a sob and not a hum, but the first real word she had spoken in 7 years. Tovin! She said it to the empty garden, to the rowan tree, to the moon. She said it because his name had been collecting in her chest for 4 months, and she had at last found the door it had been waiting for. The pendant at her throat flared with a soft, silver warmth, and from the other end of the garden, where she had not heard him approach, where, perhaps, he had been waiting at a distance for the precise reason that he understood this moment was hers, Tovin's voice came back, low and rough and disbelieving. Yes, yes, little one, I'm here. She turned. He stood at the edge of the gravel path in his shirt sleeves. No coat, golden eyes wet with something she had never seen in them before. He did not cross to her. He waited. She rose from the bench. She walked the length of the path. The moon came down through the rowan and lit the way. When she reached him, she lifted her hand. She placed it flat against his chest, over his heart, and felt the rapid, steady beat of it under her palm. Tovin, she said again, because the word, once given, wanted to be given again. Aoife, She stopped. Her throat worked. The rust of 7 years did not come off in a single night, and she was not foolish enough to expect it to, but she had a word to give him, one specific word, and she had been thinking about it for a long time, and she found that she could shape it after all. Yours, she whispered. His breath caught. Mine, he said, as if asking, as if he would not assume. Yours, she said, if you'll have me. He laughed. The rough, low laugh she had come to love, and the sound of it broke into something halfway between a laugh and a sob. And he caught her hand against his chest and brought her knuckles to his mouth. Little one, he said, I have had you since the moment I crossed the threshold of that hall. I have only been waiting for you to have me back. She rose on her toes and she pressed her forehead to his, the way wolves did, the way mates had done for 1,000 years, and her wolf, the wolf she had thought never came, uncurled just a little, somewhere very deep inside her, and stretched. She had been wrong, she realized. The wolf had not failed to come at 16. The wolf had been waiting for safety, because I needed it to be true, not just poetic. The truth is that the parts of us we think are broken are often, in fact, protected. The voice that goes silent, the heart that goes numb, the trust that refuses to come back, these are not failures of character. They are a younger version of you, standing guard, refusing to open the gate until it's safe. Healing isn't forcing those guards to stand down. Healing is becoming the kind of life they're finally willing to lay their weapons down inside of. Ape's wolf didn't come because she was finally fixed. Her wolf came because she was finally home. May you find your home too, and may your wolf come running when you do. For this, it would be a long time still before the wolf came fully into her, months yet. Perhaps a year, the old healer of the hold would tell her later. But in that moment beneath the rowan, Aoife felt her, and Aoife knew her, and Aoife was no longer alone inside her own skin. Tovin's arms came around her. He held her, and she let herself be held. And the moon went on looking down through the bare branches of the rowan tree as if it had been waiting for this particular night for a very long time. Somewhere along the eastern wall of the garden, the first crocus opened its small purple mouth to the dark. 2 winters later, on a clear cold morning, when the smoke from the hold's chimneys rose straight up into a sky the colour of pale glass, A young woman in a green wool coat walked along the eastern wall of the garden with a small wicker basket on her arm. She was gathering the last of the autumn rowan berries for the kitchen. The cook wanted them for a winter cordial. The woman had volunteered for the task because she liked the garden in the early hours, when the gardeners had not yet come, and the only sounds were the small private sounds of a place at peace with itself. She was humming. It was a tune her mother had hummed to her when she was very small, and she had not remembered that she remembered it until a few months ago, when it had risen up in her one morning over breakfast, and she had hummed it without thinking. And Tovin, across the table, had set down his cup very carefully and said, "That is a very old song. Do you know where you learned it?" She had not. She had thought, perhaps, from a dream. It turned out the old healer of the hold confirmed that Aoife's mother had been born in Hale Orin, the daughter of a minor noble house long believed extinct. She had married into the northern pack as a young woman and never spoken of her origins. The moon pendant, the healer said, had been a betrothal gift from her own grandmother, and it was older than the hold itself. "Someone in your blood was ours," Tovin had written that first week. He had been more right than he knew. The young woman with the basket reached the rowan tree at the garden's heart and stopped. She set the basket down on the stone bench. She lifted her face to the morning light. The pendant at her throat caught the sun and sent a small, bright flicker across the bark of the tree. "Aoife," she turned. Tovin stood on the gravel path with their daughter on his shoulders, a small, dark-haired girl of 14 months with golden eyes and a determined fistful of her father's collar. The child shrieked with delight at the sight of her mother and waved both fat hands. "She insisted on finding you," Tovin said. His voice was warm with the particular helpless laughter of fathers. "I tried to tell her you were working." Aoife laughed. The sound came easily now. It had taken time, but it had come. She crossed the path and lifted her daughter down off her father's shoulders and pressed her nose into the baby's soft dark hair. The child smelled of milk and cedar and, faintly, of the moon. "Hello, my little wolf," Aoife murmured. Tovin stepped close. He set his hand at the small of her back. He looked, as he often did, as if he could not quite believe the morning was real. "Walk with us?" he said. She nodded. They walked. The baby in Aoife's arms began to chew on her own fist with great seriousness. The rowan tree behind them dropped a single late berry onto the stone bench, far above the hold of the long moon. The last of the night's clouds blew east, and a thin curl of new moon, almost invisible against the bright sky, hung over the city like a promise that had at last been kept. In her chest, the wolf that had once refused to come stretched in the sun and slept, and was warm. I didn't write this story to tell you that a king will come. Most of us will not be rescued by royalty. What I wanted to say, underneath the wolves and the marble and the moon pendants, is something simpler and harder. It is this: the people who hurt you were wrong about you. They were wrong when they called you broken. They were wrong when they said you were too quiet, too much, too little, too late. Their version of you was never the real you. It was a cage they built because they were too small to hold who you actually are. Somewhere in your life, there is a rowan tree. There is a garden you have not walked in yet. There is a name you have not yet said out loud. And there is, I promise you, a version of yourself who has been waiting, patiently, faithfully, for years, for the moment it is finally safe to come home. Be gentle with her when she arrives. If this story moved you, if you cried with Aoife, raged at Renwood, fell a little in love with Tovin, or simply needed to be reminded that the quiet ones are never as broken as the world insists, please like this video. Share it with a friend who believes silent souls deserve loud love, and subscribe for more cinematic shifter romances every week. Tell me in the comments, which scene made you ache the most? The slap on the marble? The notebook in the carriage? The single word beneath the rowan? Your stories make these stories. Hit that bell and I'll see you in the next one.